Good evening. Tonight I'm going to continue on with the Izdebar saga. So I will be reading pages 291 to 290, let's see. I'll be reading pages 291 to 298. I'm reading from the Red Book by C.G. Jung, Reader's Edition. And so this is in the middle of the active imagination with Izdubar. And yesterday I explained all about Izdubar, so you can go back to yesterday's session to get the details. That would be part 27 of this extended reading. Second day, which I've called Healing Izdubar. No dream gave me the saving word. Izdubar lay silent and still all night until daybreak. I paced the mountain ridge, I paced the mountain ridge, pondering, and looked back on my western lands, where there is so much knowledge and so much possibility for help. I love Izdebar and do not want him to wither away miserably. And where should help come from? No one will travel the hot, cold path. And I am afraid to return to that path. And in the east, was there possibly help there? But what about the unknown dangers that loomed there? I do not want to go blind. What use would that be to Izdebar? What use would that be to Izdebar? I cannot carry this lamed one as a blind man either. Yes, if I were powerful like Izdebar, what use is science here? Toward evening, I went up to Izdebar and spoke to him. Keep in mind that Izdebar is this giant that Dr. Jung is working with in his imagination. And I'm just going to bring up his picture for a moment so that we all remember what it is that we're talking about here. Let's see. I have it deep in my hard drive, which I'm not really using anymore, but anyway. Okay, Izdebar, I finally found him. Okay, all right, so this is Izdebar, and I'm going to leave him on the screen for a couple of minutes and read on. What use is science here? Toward evening, I went up to Izdebar and spoke to him. Now, mind you, the little creature at the bottom of this picture, under Izdebar's feet, is Dr. Jung. Okay. Toward evening, I went up to Izdebar and spoke to him. Izdebar, my prince, listen. I will not let you decline. The second evening is falling. We have no food, and we are bound to die if I cannot find help. We cannot expect that help will come from the west, but help is possible from the east. Did you meet anyone on your way whom we could call on for help? Izdebar. Let it be. May death come when it will. My heart bleeds at the thought of leaving you here without having done the utmost to help you. Izdebar, what help is your magical power to you? If you were strong, as I am, you could carry me, but your poison can only destroy and not help. If we were in my land, swift wagons would bring us help. Izdebar, if we were in my land, your poisoned barb would not have reached me. Tell me, do you know of no help from the side of the east? Izdubar. The way there is long and lonely. The way there is long and lonely, and when you reach the plains after crossing the mountains, you will meet the powerful sun, which will blind you. Aye, but what if I wandered by night, and if I sheltered from the sun during the day? Izdebar. In the night all the serpents and dragons crawl out of their holes, and you, unarmed, will inevitably fall victim to them. Let it be. How would this help? My legs have withered and are numb. I prefer not to bring home the booty of this journey. And so you can see all the snakes and dragons that are around Izdubar in this image. Should I risk everything? Should I not risk everything? Izdubar, useless. Nothing is gained if you die. Let me think it over a bit. Perhaps a saving thought will yet come to me. I withdraw and sit down on a rock high above the ridge of the mountain, and this speech began in me. Great Izdubar, you are in a hopeless position, and I know less. What can be done? It is not always necessary to act. Sometimes thinking is better. I am basically convinced that Izdebar is hardly real in the ordinary sense, but is a fantasy. It would help if the situation were considered from another angle. Considered. It is remarkable that even here thoughts echo. One must be quite alone. But this will hardly last. He will, of course, not accept that he is a fantasy, but instead claim that he is completely real and that he can only be helped in a real way. Nevertheless, it would be worth trying. This means once. I will appeal to him. I, Prince, my prince, powerful one, listen, I thought a thought came to me that might save us. I think that you are not at all real, but only a fantasy. Izdubar. I am terrified by this thought. It is murderous. Do you even mean to declare me unreal? Now that you have lamed me so pitifully, perhaps I have not made myself clear enough and have spoken too much in the language of the Western lands. I do not mean to say that you are not real at all, of course, but only as real as a fantasy. If you could accept this, much would be gained. Izdebar, what would be gained by this? You are you are a tormenting devil. I, pitiful one, I will not torment you. The hand of the doctor does not seek to torment, even if it causes grief. Can you really not accept that you are a fantasy? Izdebar, woe betide me. In what magic do you want to entangle me? Should it help me if I make myself for a fantasy? I'm sorry. Should I help? Should it help me if I take myself for a fantasy? I. You know that the name one bears means a lot. You also know that one often gives the sick new names to heal them, for with the new nature, they come by a new essence. Your name is your essence. Izdubar. You are right. Our priests also say this. So are you prepared to admit that you are a fantasy? Izdebar. If it helps, yes. Righto. Going on. The inner voice now spoke to me as follows. While admittedly he is a fantasy now, the situation remains extremely complex. A fantasy cannot simply be simply negated and treated with resignation either. It calls for action. Anyway, he is a fantasy and thus considerably more volatile. I think I can see a way forward. I can take him on my back for now. I went to Izdebar and said to him, a way has been found. You have become light, lighter than a feather. Now I can carry you. I put my arms around him and lift him up from the ground. He is lighter than air, and I struggle to keep my feet on the ground, since my load lifts me up into the air. Izdubar, that was a masterstroke. Where are you carrying me? I'm going to carry you down into the western lands. My comrades will happily accommodate such a large fantasy. Once we have crossed the mountains and have reached the houses of the hospitable men, I can calmly go about finding a means to restore you completely again. Carrying him on my back, I climbed down the small rock path with great care, more in danger of being whirled aloft by the wind than by losing balance because of my load, in plunging down the mountainside. I hang on to my all too lightweight load. Finally, we reach the bottom of the valley and the way of the hot and cold pain. But this time I am blown by a whistling east wind down through the narrow rocks and across the fields towards inhabited places, making no contact with the painful way. Spurred on, I hasten through beautiful lands. I see people ahead of me, Ammonius and the Red One. When we are right behind them, they turn round and run off into the fields with horrified cries. I must have proved a strange sight indeed. Izdebar, who are these misshapen ones? Are these your comrades? Aye, these are not men. They are so-called relics of the past, which one still often encounters in the Western lands. They used to be very important. They're now used mostly as shepherds. So the red one is a shepherd. Uh-huh. Izdubar, what a wondrous country. But look, isn't that a town? Don't you want to go there? No, God forbid, I don't want a crowd to gather, since the enlightened live there. They can't you smell them? They're actually dangerous, since they cook the strongest poisons from which even I must protect myself. The people there are totally paralyzed, wrapped in a brown poisonous vapor, and can only move with artificial means. But you need not worry. Night has almost fallen and no one will see us. Moreover, no one would admit to having seen me. I know an out of the way house here. I have close friends there who will take us in for the night. Izdebar. Izdebar and I come to a quiet, dark garden in this secluded house. I hide Izdebar under the drooping branches of a tree, go up to the door of the house and knock. I ponder the door. It is much too small. I will never be able to get Izdebar through it. Yet a fantasy takes up no space. Why did this excellent thought not occur to me earlier? I return to the garden and with no difficulty squeeze Izdebar into the size of an egg and put him in my pocket. Then I walk into the welcoming house where Izdebar should find healing. Thus my God found salvation. He was saved precisely by what one would actually consider fatal, namely by declaring him a figment of the imagination. How often has it been assumed that the gods have been brought to their end in this way? This was obviously a serious mistake, since this was precisely what saved the god. He did not pass away, but became a living fantasy, whose workings I could feel on my own body, my inherent heaviness. My inherent heaviness faded, and the hot and cold way of pain no longer burned and froze my soles. The weight no longer kept me pressed to the ground, but instead the wind carried me lightly like a feather while I carried the giant. One used to, one used to believe that one could murder a god, but the god was saved. He, but the god was, but the god was saved. He forged a new axe in the fire and plunged again into the flood of light of the east to resume his ancient cycle. But we clever men crept around lamed and poisoned and did not even know that we lacked something. But I loved my God and took him to the house of men, since I was convinced that he also really lived as a fantasy and should therefore not be left behind, wounded and sick. And hence I experienced the miracle of my body losing its heaviness when I burdened myself with the God. St. Christopher, the giant, bore his burden with difficulty, despite the fact that he bore only the Christ child. But I was as small as a child and bore a giant, and yet my burden lifted me up. The Christ child became an easy burden for the giant Christopher, since Christ himself said, "My yoke is sweet and my burden is light." We should not bear Christ as he is unbearable, but we should be Christ. For then our yoke is sweet and our burden easy. This tangible and apparent world is one reality, but fantasy is the other reality. So long as we leave the God outside us, apparent and tangible, he is unbearable and hopeless. But if we turn the God into a fantasy, he is in us and is easy to bear. The God outside us increases the weight of everything heavy, while the God within us lightens everything heavy. Hence, all Christophers have stooped backs and short breath, since the world is heavy. Many have wanted to get help for their sick God and were then devoured by the serpents and dragons lurking on the way to the land of the sun. They perished in the overbright day and have become dark men, since their eyes have been blinded. Now they go around like shadows and speak of the light, but see little. But their God is in everything that they do not see. He is in the dark western lands, and he sharpens seeing eyes, and he assists those cooking the poison, and he guides serpents to the heels of the blind perpetrators. Therefore, if you are clever, take the God with you, since you know where he is. If you do not have him, if you do not have him with you in the western lands, he will come running to you at night with clanking armor and a crushing battle axe. If you do not have him with you in the land of the dawn, then you will step unaware on the divine worm who awaits your unsuspecting heel. You gain everything from the God whom you bear, but not his weapon, since he crushed it. He who conquers needs weapons, but what else do you want to conquer? You cannot conquer more than the earth. And what is the earth? It is round all over and hangs like a drop in the cosmos. You will not reach the sun, and your power will not even extend to the barren moon. You will conquer neither the sea, nor the snow on the poles, nor the sands of the desert, but only a few spots on the green earth. You will not conquer anything for any length of time. Your power will turn into dust tomorrow. For above all, at the very least, you must conquer death. So do not be a fool. Throw down your weapon. God himself smashed his weapon. Armor is enough to protect you from the fools who still suffer from the need to conquer God. God's armor will make you invulnerable and invisible to the worst fools. Take your God with you. Bear him down to your dark land where people live who rub their eyes each morning and yet always see only the same thing and never anything else. Bring your God down to the haze pregnant with poison, but not like those blinded ones who try to illuminate the darkness and lanterns which it does not comprehend. Instead, secretly carry your God to a hospitable roof. The huts of men are small, and they cannot welcome the God despite their hospitality and willingness. Hence, do not wait until rawly, bungling hands of men hack your God to pieces, but embrace him again lovingly until he is taken on the form of his first beginning. Let no human eye see the much loved, terribly splendid one in the state of his illness and lack of power. Consider that your fellow men are animals without knowing it. So long as they go to pasture or lie in the sun or suckle their young or mate with each other, they are beautiful and harmless creatures of dark Mother Earth. But if the God appears, they begin to rave, since the nearness of God makes people rave. Yet terrible with fear and fury, and suddenly attack one another in fratricidal struggles, since one senses the approaching God in the other. So conceal the God that you have taken with you. Let them rave and maul each other. Your voice is too weak for those raging to be able to hear. Thus do not speak and do not show the God, but sit in a solitary place and sing incantations in the ancient manner. Set the egg before you, the God in his beginning, and behold it, and incubate it with the magical warmth of your gaze. Okay, so that was the beginning of an incantation. Tomorrow's reading will be the incantations from the Red Book. So I hope you understood that section. It basically means that God lives, and God lives in all of us, in our psyche, and not in the physical world where God gets poisoned, as we know. So I hope that's been helpful, and I will terminate at this time. Hello, Matthias. Thank you for joining me today. So anyway, I'm going to terminate the reading at this time, and tomorrow I will be reading the incantations. I will probably be doing it in the morning, as I have an advanced reading group meeting in the afternoon. So I hope you enjoyed this. Take care. See you soon.